You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Let's dive into a brand new episode. Before we get started on this episode, here's a not so short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster or the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed here. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 25 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. Steve isn't, nor does he offer any legal advice. For any legal advice, you must speak with a lawyer. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search for author Steve Worsley. You can also take Steve's courses on Udemy or Skillshare, and you can find out more about those at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Hello, you're listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with myself, Steve Worsley. Today, we are going to be doing episode 262, and today's topic is Mold Remediation 101. So the reason I wanted to talk about mold remediation is, of course, that's something that we deal with. That's something that all of you listeners at some point have probably dealt with. So it's just something I wanted to talk about and go through from my perspective and teach you guys and educate all of you as to how you can decide what you're going to do, who you're going to hire, and all that information. So let's start with the first thing. When do you need mold remediation? To me, that's a simple answer. If you can visibly see mold, you need remediation. Now, for those of you that are like, well, we can't see any mold, so we don't have any issues, that's another rabbit hole that I'm not going to go down in today's episode. But it is something that, just to touch on a little bit, you could have mold and or mycotoxin concerns and not see anything visibly. Obviously, if you have mycotoxin concerns, there would have to have been toxic mold growth, which could be several different types of molds. We're not going to just talk about black mold. But anyhow, my point is when it comes to toxic mold infestations, it doesn't have to be Stachybotrys that we all know is the toxic mold. Anytime you see any mold growth, let's just say it's a little tiny area, should you bring in a professional? Of course, I'm going to tell you you should. And the reason why is because there's a lot more to mold remediation than just cutting out sheetrock and calling it a day. Now, I want to be clear, per our certification standards and the EPA, any mold infestations that are smaller than 9 square feet, it's actually 10 square feet, but 9 square feet, you can technically do it on your own. Would I suggest that? No. Now, are there circumstances where you could have one little tiny mold infestation and you could just cut it out and do it on your own? Absolutely. But on the other hand, if you're going to do it, you obviously need to follow the proper protocols, but once again, mold's the gift that keeps on giving. So what you think is just a little 2x2 section, so we're talking 4 square feet, you might be able to cut that out, but then once you cut it out, what if all the insulation behind it's moldy? So my point is, it's very likely, and it could be much more widely spread than you think. So anyhow, I just wanted to go over that because that's what our EPA and certification standards state. We know you need mold remediation. So what's the next step? Once again, you need to get somebody involved that knows what they're doing. In my opinion, the next step is what I call an SOW, which is scope of work. That is an important step, in my opinion, because you need somebody that knows what they're doing, that can write these protocols as far as the work that should be performed. And if you don't, you could have what you think is a professional. They could come in and not even follow the right protocols and leave a mess. I've dealt with clients that they hire a restoration company comes in, they say, oh yeah, there's mold right here, we're going to cut it out. They come in, they roll up the carpet, put it against one wall, cut out the mold, and think they're done. We go in there and we can still see visible mold growth. And my point is, at the end of the day, they didn't do it properly. If you would have hired someone like myself to write the scope of work, one of the main things that I would have done differently is you can't just roll up wet carpet and pad and think that that's okay to leave in that room. That's a haven for mold growth. So the SOW or the protocols, whatever verbiage you want to use, is very, very important. That way somebody has something to follow. To me, it's no different than, SOPs or whatever terminology you want to call it. It helps to have guidelines. And even if a company says, yeah, we're going to do it to IICRCS 520 standards, doesn't mean they're actually going to follow it. If you have a scope of work that, let's just say you hired myself to do this, if you hired me, I would outline step by step. Now, am I going to go over every step in detail? No, because we all do things differently. But I'm going to go step by step and say, carpet and padding in that room must be removed. You must have a containment. You must have A, B, C, and D. Having that document and giving that to your mold remediation company or contractor will hold them to those steps. If you don't have that document, it's kind of willy-nilly free-for-all. So that's why, in my opinion, the SOW is so important. Once again, are we wrong? Are there steps that we could miss? Absolutely. We can only give you a scope of work based on the extent of damage that we're familiar with or that we're aware of. So if you go into it and then you find out, oh, well, we need to remove some subflooring or we need to remove a water heater, those are unforeseen things that you could run into. But on the other hand, if you have the proper professional writing your scope of work, we can not foresee those things, but we can prepare you that, hey, at this point, we may have to remove the water heater. So scope of work, very important. So then the next step, who are you going to hire as your contractor? Do you do a quick Google search and go, oh, okay, these people are really prominent on Google. I get it. That's where most of us would start. But on the other hand, paying to have advertising or be number 1 or 2 on a Google search doesn't make them the best choice. So choosing your remediation contractor is very important. We've done episodes on how to choose your contractor. Matter of fact, I actually have an opt-in that I believe is on our website, but I'm not sure. But anyhow, if you would like that, just reach out to me and say, hey, Steve, I heard you mention on the podcast, you do have a document if we sign up for your email list that we can get that. And it's a simple document that kind of walks you through the steps. But my point is make sure that you're hiring the proper professional. Because if you don't, you could be like a lot of the clients I deal with, you could be dealing with a second remediation contractor after you paid the first one and they didn't do the job right. So make sure you choose the proper remediation contractor. As I said, I'm not going to go down that whole laundry list of all the qualifications, but a few key points. Make sure that they are, or the technicians are, certified mold remediation contractors. Make sure that they're insured. Make sure that if you live in a state where they have to be licensed, which is not that common, make sure that they are licensed. So insurance, licensing, and certification is very important. Now, when it comes to choosing the contractor, if you're dealing with a contractor that you feel's kind of flighty, go with your gut. If you have a contractor that wants 100% paid up front, I would question that. Now, it's not uncommon, and I know for my company, we do require at least 20% down. So my point is it's not abnormal to ask our clients for money down. Now, if we're dealing with insurance, there's steps you have to take and all that fun stuff. So, but my point is make sure that you're not paying 100% for something that's not completed. And even if they're a wonderful company, it would really not be a good thing if you hired them and they're not, and then you're out all that money. So choosing your contractor is very important. The next step, they're going to come in and they're going to do remediation. So what are they going to do? Are they establishing containments? Are they telling you should leave the home? By the way, don't be surprised. As far as CNC contractor services, we will not allow you to stay in the home while we're doing remediation. Now, are there circumstances where we can say, okay, I think it might be safe. Maybe there's no central air or an HVAC system, so there's no cross-contamination concerns. There could be circumstances where we allow the client to still be there, but for the most part, it's not a good idea, and it's for your personal safety and your health. All sorts of equipment that we're using, chemicals that we're using, ozone machines, stuff like that. It's just not safe for you to be there. So expect that the remediation contractor is going to tell you can't live there or be there while they're doing it. So the next question is how long is it going to take? As I said earlier, mold is the gift that keeps on giving. A lot of times, I might think that it's going to take a minimum, 3 to 4 days, couple of days for our cool down period, which is 48 hours of just air scrubbers running. Anyhow, a lot of times that 3 or 4 day project can turn into 7 or 8 days. So just go into it knowing that you're likely going to have to be out of your home for several days longer than you anticipated. Now, on the other hand, if you have a contractor that comes in one day, works a day or two, 10-hour days, 8-hour days, however long they want to work, they hit it hard, and then all of a sudden, they don't show up for a few days. You probably don't want that contractor either. And my point is I've had clients that literally said it took months for the remediation to happen. In my experience, and we've done some major projects like gutting an entire home, it should not take months. Now, is it going to take months to do the remediation, do what I call the rehab, putting the sheetrock and everything back up? Absolutely, that can take a while. But on the other hand, the remediation contractor, they should be able to get in and get out within a week or two. If they can't do that, you probably should find another company. So my point with this is expect to not be there. Expect it to probably take a total of 5 to 7 days. Once again, I can only speak for my company. We work through weekends because we know our clients are paying for an Airbnb or hotel or whatever. But we try to go in, do all the work, get everything done, hit our cool down period, and then get our tenants back in there. Now, on the other hand, if you're really mold sensitive, you probably should wait till you get PRV testing results. So anyhow, just expect it to not be a 2-day process because that's not how mold remediation works. So I mentioned PRV testing. Once you're done, or the contractor is done with all the remediation, it is very, very important to do what we call PRV testing. PRV means post-remediation verification. Make sure that you have that done. On top of that, I always recommend to have a third party come in and do that. Now, does it always happen that way? No. Most of my clients are like, hey, Steve, we trust you. You do the PRV testing. And I totally get that. Like, if you don't trust me to do the PRV testing, you probably shouldn't trust us to get all the mold out. But on the other hand, to remove yourself or the contractor from having a conflict of interest, it would be best to have a third-party company come in. Now, when they do the PRV testing, what should they be doing? The PRV, like I said, isn't just testing. It's post-remediation verification. That includes a very thorough inspection of the work area where the mold was removed. For the most part, and I say for the most part because I can't guarantee anything, we can go in there, or I can go in there and do a visual inspection and tell you if the mold was removed properly. I want to backtrack just a little bit. When we talk about PRV testing, we want to make sure that that has been completed before any waterproofing is applied. Just to give you a quick overview of that, we recommend it that once we're all done with PRV testing and everything looks good, we should waterproof. You'll hear people say use Kills. We can use whatever type of waterproofing you're willing to pay. We typically use an antifungal paint called Aftershock. It's made by Fiberlock. Anyhow, it's very expensive. So if my client says, yeah, Steve, we want waterproofing, but we're going to just pay you to put kills. Do not do the waterproofing until you have done the PRV inspections, testing, and have gotten the results back. Going back to the PRV, you need a very, very thorough inspection of the work area where they remove the mold. You need to do surface sampling. Air testing by itself is not enough for verification of indoor air quality. Especially with PRV, we're only doing air testing inside of our containment. Obviously, we do it outside of the containment if the client wants to pay for that. But my point is, don't just trust the air tests. Air tests are not accurate for one main reason is air pressures in your home are changing all the time. So don't just go in and run an air test and say everything's good. Don't just use a visual inspection. The point of the surface sampling, which is a tape lift or a swab, the purpose of that is to verify that the mold was removed from the building materials. Just to explain that a little bit, you have to remove mold. It physically has to be removed. Spraying mold will not remove the mold. It actually could feed the mold. So how do you do that? If we have insulation that's got mold on it, we throw it away. Sheetrock, if it has a mold on it, we throw it away. There are things we can't just throw away. Your wall studs, your subfloor, floor joists, roof trusses. Obviously, we have to abrasively remove the hyphae of the mold. So as I've explained in different podcasts, mold is like your grass. It's trying to grow deeper into whatever it's growing into. So spraying it, that's why it's a bad idea. You can actually be feeding the mold and you would be promoting deeper mold growth, which is the hyphae of the mold. So we come in and abrasively remove that. That can be done with dry ice blasting, baking soda blasting, or what we do is we actually sand. You have to abrasively remove all the mold. So that's why we do a surface sample. So if I'm doing PRV testing, let's say it was in your laundry room. They remove the sheetrock, they remove the insulation if there's any insulation in the wall. Then they have to sand, dry ice blast, or baking soda blast the rest of the mold that's in those wall studs or your subfloor. Are there circumstances where the subfloor has to come out? Absolutely. We're not going to get down into that rabbit hole. But my point is, the surface sample is a tape lift that I take from, let's say, a subfloor, wall stud, exterior OSB, whatever it is. I'm going to sample that. I'm going to send that off to the lab. The whole end goal with that is for it to come back negative for mold. I know I kind of got off on that little bit of a tangent, but it's very important that they do PRV testing, air testing, and surface sampling. Now, once all that's done, they're obviously going to send that stuff out to a lab. Typically takes, depending on where the lab is, 3 to 5 business days. Once you have those samples that come back and they look good, then you can waterproof and then you can start rehabbing it by putting the insulation sheetrock back up. So PRV testing is a very important step when it comes to mold remediation. You know, if you can't afford it, I get it. But at the end of the day, $200 for PRV testing and inspections could save you a lot of heartache down the road. Because here's the take on that. What if you rehab it, you put all the insulation back up, put the sheetrock in, and then you find out a month or 2 down the road, you're still sick? Well, you're going to have to tear it all back out and figure out what went wrong. Typically, they just didn't chase it far enough. So make sure you do not skip the PRV part of mold remediation. So now it's all done. You put everything back together. The last thing you need is a prevention plan. So I say this to my clients all the time. We can go in, we can do the best remediation in the world. We take care of everything. Everything's dried out. All the mold's removed. You could move back in or rehab it and literally 2 days later have another moisture intrusion event. And then you're back at square one. So prevention is key. I know for our company, once we're done with everything, we don't give you like a full prevention plan. But we do provide a document that states You have to monitor your humidity. You have to make sure your kids aren't splashing in the tub. You got to make sure when you're washing dishes, you're not splashing everywhere. There's steps you must take. So the prevention side of it is very important. Once again, last thing you want to do is spend $10,000, $15,000 with remediation, rehabbing, and then all of a sudden a month or two later you have a roof leak or a water heater that leaks and you're back at square one. So the prevention plan is very important. Make sure that you don't skip that. And, hopefully for the most part, and I say for the most part, but we don't want to be coming back as mold remediation contractors, or I'll say my company does it. I'm sure other companies wouldn't really care. But my point is we don't want to come back and keep doing work. We want it to be one and done. You follow a prevention plan and everything's good to go. So I know we kind of got off on little tangents there, but key points that I want you to take away from this episode. Make sure you hire the proper contractor. Make sure they're taking the proper steps. Make sure that when you pay them, that you understand that their work is done and that you shouldn't have any health concerns. PRV testing, very important, and then you need a prevention plan. So once again, thank you for listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast. Today was episode 262. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure you go to our website at cnccontractorservices.com and sign up for the mold investigation checklist. Again, go to cnccontractorservices.com and get your free mold investigation checklist today. You can also on cnccontractorservices.com find out more about Steve's courses and books and consultations. Once again, go to cnccontractorservices.com.